Hey guys, Kiwi here. Warning is spoilers for Breaking Bad, El Camino, and Better Call Saul. In this video I'll be breaking down, discussing every Easter egg, reference, and hidden detail that I could find from Better Call Saul's series finale, Season 6, Episode 13, Saul Gone. Like the video if you end up enjoying it, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter for more Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad content. With that being said, let's jump into the breakdown. The cold open starts with shots out in the desert to where the final resting place to Jimmy Suzuki Esteem is. As it turns out, the 613 teaser clip doesn't happen, as in the teaser the car looks rusted, implying sometime during the Breaking Bad or Gene timeline, which isn't the case. The cold open takes us to a 508 flashback, and I love how the cold open is a flashback to Better Call Saul's most widely loved episode up until that point. We also see shots of a space blanket and a dollar bill, both from episode 508 as well. In 508, Mike used a space blanket to sleep in, along with Jimmy using it to lure the final hitman for them to take out. The dollar bill is in a cactus, referencing when Jimmy got a huge thorn in his toe from trying to pick up bills that came out of a rip from one of the duffel bags with money due to Jimmy dragging them on the ground. While Jimmy and Mike are sitting at the well, Jimmy's suggesting taking the monies in reference to episodes 107 and 110.
What are you doing? The right thing.
Did I dream it, or did I have $1,600,000 on my desk in cash? When I close my eyes, I can still see it. It's burned into my retinas like I was staring into the sun.
In episode 107, Jimmy had gotten Mike to steal the Kettleman's stolen money, along with episode 110 when Jimmy asked Mike why they did the right thing instead of taking the money for themselves.
No one on God's green earth knew we had it. We could have split it 50-50. We could have gone home with $800,000 each, tax-free.
Your point being?
Why didn't we? What stopped us?
I remember you saying something about doing the right thing.
I don't even know what that means.
You know, we're sitting on $7 million here, literally.
And?
I say we take it, split it 50-50, take off.
Mike told Jimmy that he got hired to do a job and that it was as simple as that, but Jimmy tells Mike that he knows what stopped him and that if he's ever in that situation again, he won't ever let doing the right thing stop himself from taking the money again.
You want to know why I didn't take that money? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Me personally, I was hired to do a job. I did it. It's as far as it goes.
Yeah, well, I know what stopped me. And you know what? It's never stopping me again.
It's not ours.
Could be.
Yeah, well, I know some people who would have a problem with that.
We then get the time machine question, which becomes a recurring theme throughout the episode. With Mike, he says that he'd go back to when he took his first bribe, as he regrets being a dirty cop, which made his son dirty and got him killed anyways. Jimmy mentions going into the past to invest in Warren Buffett's Berkshire, and then come back to modern time to be a billionaire. While making this video, I looked up Berkshire Hathaway, and apparently the HQ to the holding company's in Omaha, Nebraska, where Saul ends up relocating as Gene. Mike isn't impressed that Jimmy would only use the time machine for money, asking Jimmy if there's anything from the past that he would change. Jimmy doesn't answer the question now, but we get our answer during Jimmy's trial later in the episode. With Walt regrets leaving Gray Matter, while Saul regrets a certain slip and fall that he did in the past to slip in Jimmy due to him seriously hurting his knees. This gives us a backstory to why Saul has bad knees, which was mentioned in Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 when Walt and Jesse kidnapped him, along with during the 611 Walt and Jesse cameo.
Alright, I'm gonna stand up, alright? Because I got bad knees. That's better.
You know, I've got bad knees. I think you might have messed up my rotator cuff.
You're lucky I'm not charging you for my chiropractor. She's expensive.
Both answers that Jimmy/Saul gave to Mike and Walt are just phony ones, but we learned his real answers during this episode. With Mike, the one thing that Jimmy would change would be to have a heart-to-heart with Chuck during the Chuck flashback in this episode. With Walt, Saul's regret is canceling Chuck's malpractice insurance, which he confessed during the trial scene in this episode. We then see the actual Time Machine book by H.G. Wells, with Chuck being the book that Chuck grabs when he walks away after Jimmy leaves. We first saw this book in 601 at Saul's mansion during the cold open, along with in 602 at Kim's apartment during the Better Call Saul timeline. Ever since the first two episodes of Season 6, fans wondered what the significance was of the Time Machine book in the first two episodes, and now we know it was in reference to the recurring Time Machine question in the finale. We then get the final intro sequence to Better Call Saul, which shows Jeff's Albuquerque Isotope air freshener along with a dough mixer. The air freshener was in reference to Saul getting arrested and extradited back to Albuquerque. It's interesting how originally I thought the dough mixer was referencing Cinnabon, but by the end of the episode I realized that it was actually foreshadowing where where Jimmy works in the prison kitchen making bread. When Gene manages to get to his house to grab his shoebox full of mementos from his past, he also grabs a burner phone from the stockpile of them that he has in his cupboard. This obviously references how Saul Goodman used burner phones ever since Jimmy sold them during season 4 and season 5 of Better Call Saul during his suspension from the law, along with an order to get a jumpstart on his criminal clientele. We also see Gene listening into the police radio that we first saw in the season 5 Gene scene along with episode 610. During those two previous instances, Gene was listening in on the police to see if he was called in, but he never was. Now after Marion called him in, we hear police chatting about them talking about Gene, letting him know that they're outside his front door. Gene creeping around the corner to the alleyway to spy on the cops in the parking lot is in reference to both episode 507 when Jimmy looks around the corner to Fred's parents, along with episode 612 when Gene looks around the corner to the house he broke into. It's shot in the same way. Gene dumpster diving is in reference to season 1 when Jimmy went dumpster diving for shredded sandpaper documents, which was hilarious due to it being unnecessary since the shredded documents were actually in the recycling bin beside the dumpster. In both instances, we get a disgusting shot of Jimmy/Gene getting gross food on him. In season 1, Jimmy was hiding from some employees, while in season 6, Gene was hiding from the cops. The dumpster diving also ended up being fruitless in both instances due to Jimmy not finding the shredded papers in season 1, while Gene still getting caught in 613. Gene's been living kind of a trash life, so it's suitable that he gets caught in garbage, something that Marie also finds funny later on in the episode due to thinking that Saul is a trash human being. While Gene is in hiding in the dumpster, he takes out Ed's vacuum card, which we saw in Better Call Saul 405 when Saul called Ed to first relocate as Gene, along with 606 showing that the origins were from Caldera's contact book. We also saw it in Breaking Bad when Saul gives a copy of it to Walt in crawlspace. The Hoover Max sentence that we hear Gene try to memorize in 613 is the code phrase to tell Ed when he calls him, which is written on the back of the card. We also heard this code phrase in Breaking Bad crawlspace, El Camino, Better Call Saul 405, along with during the season 5 Gene scene.
Call that number and you leave a message. You tell them that you need a new dust filter for a Hoover Max extract. Pressure Pro Model 60.
Pressure Max, Max Pressure, Hoover, maybe it's a Pro Max. Got like a filter.
Hoover products are right over there on the wall behind you.
Originally, I thought Gene making so much noise over knocking over a shoebox and diamonds was possibly what got him caught, unless one of the cops actually did see him dumpster dive, but when Gene slowly stands up in the dumpster with the cops surrounding him, the angle of the scene shows that Gene actually got caught due to a security camera that was in the alley. While Gene is at the police station, the cops are watching the same Saul commercial that was shown on Jesse's TV in Breaking Bad Season 2, Episode 8.
You are under arrest.
Better Call Saul. Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights? Constitution says you do, and so do I.
Gene punching the cell door is similar to him kicking the HHM trash can in Season 1, Episode 1, or kicking the phone booth in Episode 611, except this time he hurts himself more than the object that he's assaulting. When Gene laughs while in the jail cell reminds me a lot of Walt's laugh at the end of Breaking Bad Crawlspace. The phrase, "my lawyer will ream your ass," etched on the jail wall may be in reference to Saul etching the phrase "Saul Goodman was here" during the Season 2 Gene scene. The phrase etched on the jail cell wall also makes Gene realize that he is Saul. He wasn't good at being on the run, but now that he's captured, he's in his home court. Now that Gene is arrested, he's reverting back to Saul. Saul has a total of 27 violations, and his charges include federal conspiracy to manufacture and distribute controlled substances, working with Walt and Jesse, 8 counts of money laundering, confirming that he had 8 different money laundering businesses, accessory for multiple murders, including 2 federal agents being Hank and Gomez. Saul goes from life in prison plus 190 years, which they gave him an original 30 years in prison deal for, down to 7.5, but he throws away the deal of a lifetime as we see later on, getting 86 years. When Saul is speaking to Marie during the plea meeting, he says how he met Hank on multiple occasions, which is in reference to Better Call Saul 503 when he first met Hank, along with Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 while representing Badger.
Saul Goodman, I'm Mr. Molina's attorney, and you're in violation of his constitutional rights.
It's all good, man. Really? Come on, that's your name?
I sense you're discussing my client. Anything you care to share with me?
Sure, your commercials? They suck ass.
Saul plays the victim card and brings up when Walt and Jesse kidnapped him, giving a greater significance to why the 611 Walt and Jesse cameo flashback to Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 was necessary. Saul says how he was afraid of Walt killing him if he ratted, referencing the orchestrated prison murders from Breaking Bad.
They murdered 10 men inside 3 prisons. in the space of 2 minutes, knifed, throats slashed. A man was burned alive.
Saul also references Mike's lawyer from Breaking Bad Season 5 and calls him a colleague, although he talked smack about him to Mike and told Mike not to use him. Funny how Mike worked with that lawyer against Saul's advice, just like how Saul worked with Walt against Mike's advice, but I digress.
Storm is out there because of this. I told you not to use that lawyer. He's a hack.
Shut up, Saul, and get the bag.
Now listen, even if this guy was gonna live, I wouldn't go near him. He's a complete amateur.
One of Saul's conditions for his plea deal is that he wants to go to FCI Butner Low in North Carolina in Wing D, saying how ADX Montrose is the Alcatraz of the Rockies. And after ruining his plea deal in court, ADX Montrose is exactly where he ends up going, as we saw on the road sign that his prisoner transport bus drove past near the end of the episode. While Saul is trying to sweeten the plea deal with the prosecutor, literally, he mentions getting a pint of mint chocolate chip ice cream once a week. I guess this is Saul's favorite flavor ice cream, as it references the flavor ice cream that Jimmy ate in the season 5 finale, along with the ice cream cone that he dropped at the end of 502. I suppose that seeing the ice cream covered with ants wasn't enough to make him hate the flavor after all. The Saul and Walt flashback is during Granite State, while Saul and Walt are waiting at Ed's to disappear and be relocated under new identities. The suitcases that Saul has are of course the ones that he brought to Ed's in Granite State, which includes the bag that we saw filled with money in Better Call Saul 405. The plane Saul and Bill Oakley are on to go back to Albuquerque is a Wayfair plane, which is the same airline that crashed into another plane mid-air in the Breaking Bad Season 2 finale. Kim leaves work early to go volunteer at a walk-in legal practice, which seems like the first real decision that she's made during her life in Florida. Kim wants to volunteer to help out just like how she wanted to help pro bono clients back when she was a lawyer. Kim may have also volunteered because she missed being a lawyer since she noticed a lawyer that reminded her of herself while she was in Albuquerque during 6/12. When Suzanne calls Kim, we don't hear the rest of the phone call of Suzanne explaining to Kim what Saul's testimony was due to the camera being outside the window. Just like in 611, how we didn't hear the rest of Gene's call to Kim, or even in 601 when we didn't hear the rest of Kim's plan to Jimmy about Sandpiper. We eventually do learn what was kept from us in those 601 and 611 scenes, but we never learn what was kept from us during the 613 scene, as we find out during the court scene that Saul made it all up just to make sure Kim would be there, which reminds me of how Jimmy tricked Rebecca into going to see Jimmy versus Chuck in 305 to see Chuck's chicanery outburst. Saul gets to wear a flashy suit one final time as Saul Goodman and says it's showtime at the beginning of the court scene. This references the episode 102 montage that showed us how Jimmy used to always say this to himself in the courtroom bathroom before going to defend his pro bono clients, which Gene also referenced in 610 after successfully conning the department store manager.
It's showtime, folks.
It's showtime.
Now, a defendant representing himself notoriously never goes well, and it's always highly advised against, but Saul does it anyways. Saul representing himself also references how Jimmy wanted to represent himself in Season 3, even though Kim offered to represent him, and then by the end of the episode, Jimmy eventually allows Kim to help him and represent him as his lawyer. Saul asks to speak and begins giving the same sympathetic victim spiel that he told Marie earlier in the episode during the plea meeting. This makes the prosecutor and Marie believe that he's going to go through with the whole speech that he previously gave them, but Saul subverts their expectations and ours by pulling a total U-turn and starts incriminating himself. Saul mentions how Walt would have been dead or behind bars in a month if he never walked into Saul's office, and this is a reference to the 611 scene of Mike telling Saul pretty much the same thing.
Well, if the cancer doesn't get him, it'll be the cops or a bullet to the head.
If he hadn't walked into my office that day, Walter White would have been dead or behind bars within a month.
Saul admitting that he took the initiative to work with Walt, also referenced the other 611 Breaking Bad scene of Saul walking into Walt's school, along with the scene at the end of Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 of Saul actually talking to Walt in his classroom.
Well, you see an amateur, I see 170 pounds of clay ready to be molded. That night I saw opportunity. I shot it. Big money.
Saul testifying against his own actions in order to bloat his ego is in a way the final thing that he ever does as Saul. It's almost like he kills Saul here, since from that moment forward, once he starts talking about Howard and Chuck, he's now transformed back into Jimmy McGill. Jimmy finally shows remorse for what happened to Howard, along with admitting guilt to Chuck's demise. Jimmy mentioning how he ruined Chuck's insurance is referencing him doing so in 307, along with him finding out in 401 how Chuck's insurance was the final straw that caused Howard to push Chuck out of HHM during 310, causing Chuck to unalive himself. Jimmy kept the secret of messing with Chuck's insurance to himself throughout the entirety of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, never telling anyone. Chuck and Howard both died without ever knowing the truth, and Kim never knew the truth until now. When Jimmy brings up Chuck, we get the amazing camera shot showing the exit sign in the corner of the courtroom, referencing episode 305 Chicanery, which showed the exit sign multiple times, along with it being the final shot above Chuck after his outburst as the episode ended. I love how we get acknowledgement of Jimmy messing with Chuck. I love how we actually see Chuck one final time. The Chuck flashback in this episode takes place just before/during season 1 of Better Call Saul. Jimmy says how he brought Chuck the Fuji apples that he likes, which is a reference to Chuck telling Ernesto to bring him Fuji apples in the season 1 finale, along with in season 3 episode 2 when Ernesto said he couldn't find any, so he got him a different kind.
They had those apples that you like? I got you half a dozen Fuji.
But to my taste, the Granny Smith apples are a bit too tart.
Those are the green ones, right?
Right. I prefer the red ones, but not Red Delicious. Those are generally tasteless. Fuji's should be in season.
They didn't have Fuji apples, so I got you Honey Crisp. Hope that's all right.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
Chuck tells Jimmy that he hopes that he didn't steal the ice cubes from a motel, which is in reference to the season 1 finale when Jimmy admitted to Howard that that's exactly what he usually does, although he tells Howard that someone can just buy the ice instead.
I'm hoping you didn't steal that from a motel ice machine.
Pretty straightforward. The ice is a pain in the ass, but he needs it. I usually sneak into a motel and fill a garbage bag.
Likewise, Chuck mentions how he could hire someone from the firm to get his groceries, which he eventually does in episode 110, Ernesto, after Jimmy stops doing it himself.
What?
You know I could hire someone to do this. I could get someone from the office.
It's a shopping list for Chuck. I mean, he's doing better, but he still needs deliveries every day.
I see.
You don't have to do it personally, it just needs to get done.
You've been doing all of this every day? For over a year.
You'll take care of this?
Absolutely. I'll get it done, and done right.
So Howard's got you looking after Chuck, huh?
Yeah, it's a few extra bucks, you know?
Jimmy tells Chuck that he wants to bring him groceries himself because he's his brother, implying that he cares about him. When Jimmy stopped bringing Chuck groceries at the end of season 1, it implied when Jimmy slowly quit caring about Chuck after learning of Chuck's betrayal of him. Chuck telling Jimmy to reimburse himself is in reference to the first episode of the show, with Jimmy reluctantly doing so after Chuck insists.
I know it's expensive here.
That's not Chuck.
I don't expect you to go out of pocket. Go ahead and reimburse yourself. Well, hold on. You got to reimburse yourself.
This one's on me.
Jimmy also mentioning getting the Financial Times newspaper also references season 1 when Jimmy kept the special newspaper from Chuck due to his billboard stunt being on the paper, resulting in Chuck stealing his neighbor's paper, which caused him to then be tased by the police and sent to the hospital. Kim also mentions in 306 how Jimmy went to a special newsstand to get Chuck's specific paper that he liked every single day.
The most important thing is the newspapers. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they're a must. There's a newsstand on Eubank that has both of them at 6 a.m., which is good because he's an early riser. The Albuquerque Journal, he gets delivered, but somebody still has to bring it in for him.
Waking at 5 in the morning to buy Charles's favorite newspaper from the single newsstand in the city that carries it.
The newsstand on Central said they might start carrying the Financial Times. So that's good, right?
Jimmy talking to Chuck about how one of his clients
got caught waving the weenie outside a Hobby Lobby.
It's in reference to all the public masturbation clients that Jimmy/Saul has had to deal with. He mentioned one in Breaking Bad season 2 episode 8, which he actually confused for Badger.
Here we go. Public masturbation. What? I don't get it. What's the kick? Why don't you do it at home like the rest of us with a big flat screen TV, 50 channels of pay-per-view, in a Starbucks? That's nice. That ain't me, man. Hey, what happened to my masturbator, Francesca? You got me all turned around.
And he mentioned another during the ending scene to 609 while also implying that he had multiple.
Another public masturbator? Which one? A new guy? Huh. Everyone must be doing it.
And I assume that Jimmy's client that he mentions during the Chuck flashback is probably the first one he had to deal with, so he's been defending clients like this his whole career as a lawyer. By the end of the court scene, Jimmy has come full circle. Throughout Better Call Saul, we've seen him transform from Jimmy to Saul to Gene. Now during the series finale, we've seen Gene transform back into Saul, and then back into Jimmy again, all in one single episode. People always asked when was the moment that Jimmy became Saul, but what about the moment when Saul became Jimmy again? This is even referenced during the season 6 suit up teaser, which was shown at the beginning of the episode with the empty coat hanger at the end. We then see the suit up teaser again at the end of the episode, this time showing Jimmy's jumpsuit on that final coat hanger. As I mentioned earlier, Jimmy now works in the prison kitchen. The dough mixer is an obvious reference to Cinnabon, nailing home the parallel between his job in prison compared to his job as Gene working at the Cinnabon, kind of implying that one wasn't really worse than the other. Gene in isolation and hiding under a fake identity was almost like him being in prison due to being so isolated when he's such a normally charismatic and talkative guy. The dough mixer could also now be seen as foreshadowing for his ultimate fate, not just from episode 611, but ever since the very first Gene scene during the cold open to the pilot episode as well. Jimmy sharing a final cigarette with Kim references them smoking together in the HHM underground parking lot during the first episode of the show, along with a later in the season when she thanks him for getting the Kettlemans to go back to HHM. The same music even plays during the cigarette scene. Also, although we don't see the black and white filter fully transition into color like some of us thought, we do get a hint of color with the ember on the end of the cigarette being colorized. The final scene has Jimmy give Kim the double finger guns, which is in reference to Kim doing the same thing to him during the season 5 finale, which in itself was a reference to Saul giving Kim the double pointers during the season 4 finale. I love how this has been a trend for the past 3 season finales, first season 4, then season 5, and now season 6, with each moment happening during Jimmy and Kim's final scenes for each season/episode. What do you think about the series finale to Better Call Saul? Let me know in the comments. It's Saul gone, that's Saul folks. Even though the show's over, there's still so much more to discuss about the Breaking Bad Better Call Saul universe along with this episode in general, so be sure to check back on the channel soon for more Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul breakdowns. I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today. If you're new to the channel or just haven't yet already, subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay updated on when I post new content on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Check out my Patreon or give a super thanks to help support the channel financially. But most importantly, I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
It's all good, man.
I believe that until proven guilty, every man, woman, and child in this country is innocent. And that's why I fight for you, Albuquerque!
Look, I don't remember the exact, password. All right, but it was a vacuum thing.